to the Git and GitHub course. So I'd like to thank you for taking this course. It's really an honor to be teaching you, and we're going to try and go over everything there is to do with Git and GitHub. So we're going to start with a little course introduction. So we're just going to go through the syllabus, what's in it, and I'm going to be giving you a step-by-step list of what we're going to be doing in the course. So let's get started. In the first section, which is this section, we're going to be introducing Git. So we're going to talk a little bit about the theory behind Git. Now, this doesn't mean the workflow or the concepts. We're just going to talk about a little bit about what Git is and where it came from, and just some of the general concepts about version control, source control. So on top of that, we're going to install Git and all of the other features we are going to need in the course. So, our terminal, our bash terminal for Windows, you don't need to worry about what that is now. We're just going to do that in this section. So I'm going to be going through and installing all these, teaching you how to install them, because there are a few features that may confuse you. So I'm going to go through and give you a full rundown of what we need to do to install everything the correct way. So the second section is solely focused on the terminal. So you probably, if you're new to development or programming, you probably have no idea what a terminal is. So we're going to go over all of that in this section. Now, this is because the terminal is not just some section that I added in there for fun. It's because in order to use Git, you need to be able to use the terminal properly. Now, it's not like you need to know all the commands and you need to be an expert in it, but you just need to know how to navigate around, know your way, just know some of the general features of it and be comfortable in that environment. It's not like any other environment that you've probably been in, such as the File Explorer or maybe even the internet or websites. It's quite bare bones, and it's just the purest way of interacting with your machine. So we're going to learn how to interact with that, learn the environment, and move around with some basic commands. So we're going to do that in that section. So the third section is where we start to get into the deeper parts of Git. So after the whole overview in the first section, or this section, we're going to start working at the workflow behind Git. So we're going to learn a little bit about how Git processes things. So, you go from making some changes to a file to putting it in the repository. Don't worry about what all that means. We'll talk about it later. So we learn about all of the flowcharts and workflow behind Git. On top of that, I'm going to teach you some basic commands so that you know how to do all of this yourself. But it's not really about the commands, it's more about the concepts, because Git is quite a complex topic if taught wrong or if interpreted wrong. So I'm going to try and make sure to go through as smooth as possible and explain it all to you so that you understand the basics of the Git workflow. So after we learn the basics of Git and basically the core of it, we're going to work into another integral part of version control in Git, and this is called branches. So we're going to focus completely on branches because it's such a big topic and it's kind of its own thing, and you can't really group it together with all the other stuff. So we're going to have a whole section just completely dedicated to branches. We're going to talk about how they work, what they are, and just how to work with them in the terminal. So we're going to do that in section 4. So in section 5, we're pretty much almost finished with Git. We still have a few more things to do, but we need GitHub for this. So we're going to be learning what GitHub is. So I'm not really going to talk about it now. If you know what GitHub is, and I'm sure a lot of developers do, then just go ahead, speed along if you want, even skip the entire section. But we're going to go through and I'm going to talk about what GitHub is. Now, a lot of people think that GitHub and Git are the same thing, and they're completely different. We're going to talk about them in the next video, so we're going to talk about the differences. But for now, in section 5, we're just going to run through GitHub. We're going to create an account, and then we're going to go and look at some repositories and just check everything out, see how GitHub really works, because it's such an important part in developer communities. So we're going to go through GitHub in detail and see how all that works. So in the 6th section, we're going to be moving on to finally connecting our Git and GitHub knowledge together. So this is what I was saying, is we didn't learn everything about Git. This is where the really important part comes in, because sure, you can use Git on your own machine, but without somewhere to put it and make it public and allow, make it open source, for example, Git is kind of useless. And of course there are still uses, but adding GitHub or some other shared server makes it so much more interesting, and it just adds a whole new world of opportunities. So we're going to learn how to, for example, take our Git directory or repository and put it on GitHub. We're going to learn about the push and pull system. You can see in that picture here how it works. Of course, you can probably take a little bit from that, but I'm going to explain it in much more detail in that section. And we're going to learn how to sort of interact and, change between the two interchangeably. So we're going to do that in that section. So in the 7th section, we're going to be learning Git GUI, so graphical user interface. So this is kind of a bonus section. I didn't actually talk about it that much and I wasn't considering it, but I felt that it was a good way to allow more ways to use Git, to show that Git isn't just some terminal commands that you can do. It's a whole thing in itself. So basically, I'm not going to go through it in that much detail, but instead of using a terminal, you can actually use a program to do all of the cool features that Git has. So adding files, committing, pushing it to a repository, doing all of that through a program. We're going to use a really nice program. It's called SourceTree. So we're going to use that. And basically, it just allows you to do everything in a graphical user interface. So you do have to watch all of the videos before that, and I would recommend it because without it you don't have really much of a basis or much knowledge about Git, and we go through things quite quick in SourceTree. I just teach you how to use the software. I don't teach you about all of the theory because of course we already did that. So I recommend you go through all of the terminal video first. Even if it's a little bit confusing and you want to use SourceTree, it's good to have 2 mediums under your belt in case you have to switch between environments. So that's pretty much it for this video. These are 7 sections along with the 8th one, which is just, finishing up and goodbyes and everything. But we're not really going to include that because it's not important. But those are the 7 sections that we're going to be covering over the course of this course.